The coach rumbled to its final stop in Ember Ridge, Wyoming territory, and Catherine Ashford's courage abandoned her completely. Through the grime-streaked window, she observed him standing there, every bit of his 7 feet 3 inches towering beside the hitching rail like nature itself had taken human shape. Samuel Blackwood, now her spouse following a ceremony performed mere minutes earlier by an itinerant minister, right at the depot platform while Catherine remained seated inside, her trembling limbs refusing to bear her weight. His correspondence had referenced his substantial stature. It had failed to convey he was practically mythological in size. Catherine measured 5 feet in her finest footwear and tipped the scales at 95 pounds following a substantial meal. Her wrists possessed such delicacy that standard jewelry simply fell away. She had just wed a man whose palm alone could span her midsection entirely, whose frame eclipsed the sunlight when he stooped to peer through the carriage window, whose words resonated like far-off thunder when he spoke, Mrs. Blackwood. Catherine. It's time to emerge now. Paralyzed, breathless, Catherine remained frozen. The remaining travelers had disembarked, abandoning her with only her travel bag and the escalating conviction that she'd committed a catastrophic error. I realize I'm unlike your expectations, Samuel spoke through the glass, his tone softer now, though the vibration still traveled through her frame. The matrimonial agency should have provided greater specificity. However, your journey's complete, our vows are spoken, and I give you my word you face no danger from me. No danger. Catherine nearly released a bitter laugh. She'd escaped Boston to avoid her stepfather's scheme to auction her to a house of ill repute, responded to an announcement seeking a bride by correspondence, journeyed 2,000 miles to marry someone unknown only to learn this unknown person could extinguish her life as easily as one might a candle flame. Please, Samuel implored, and something in his inflection compelled her to truly examine his countenance for the first time. Traditional handsomeness eluded him, his features carried too much roughness. His nose bore evidence of multiple fractures, a pale mark traced from his left brow into his hairline. Yet his eyes, rich brown like quality coffee and warm despite their penetrating quality, contained an exhaustion she understood intimately. The expression belonging to someone assessed and dismissed repeatedly. Catherine inhaled deeply, summoned her resolve, and descended from the coach. Proximity to him exceeded her worst imaginings. Her crown barely reached his chest's midpoint. When he extended his arm for escort to the wagon, she had to reach upward like an infant grasping for a parent's hand. Local residents observed their passage, some displaying amusement, others something nearer to sympathy. My property lies roughly an hour beyond town, Samuel explained as he elevated her onto the wagon bench as effortlessly as raising a teacup. It lacks refinement, but possesses structural integrity. I constructed it personally, ensured everything could withstand my dimensions. Their journey proceeded wordlessly save for wheel protests and equine footfalls. Catherine repeatedly glanced toward her new spouse, attempting to reconcile this colossal man with the contemplative correspondence he'd penned. His penmanship had displayed surprising refinement, his prose measured and thoughtful. He'd shared his affection for literature, his challenges finding acceptance, his aspiration for a partner who could perceive beyond superficial elements. She'd assumed he meant beyond his limited schooling or unpolished manners. She hadn't conceived of this. The homestead, upon arrival, matched his description, precisely lacking refinement but structurally sound. The primary dwelling stood constructed from logs as thick as mature trunks, door frames tall enough that Samuel required no stooping, furnishings hewn from substantial oak that wouldn't surrender under his mass. Everything bore enlarged proportions, designed for a Titan's existence. "I'll present your chamber," he stated, transporting her bag as though it contained nothing. "My chamber." He halted, pivoted to regard her with those coffee-hued eyes. "You imagine I'd compel you to occupy my bed? You're quaking like prey before a predator. I may possess considerable size, Catherine, but monstrosity eludes me. You'll maintain your private quarters until perhaps you determine otherwise." The room he revealed was conventionally proportioned, evidently a recent construction. The bed was modest, the furnishings delicate relative to the dwelling's remainder. He'd prepared this for her, she comprehended. Constructed her a sanctuary where standard dimensions prevailed. "My gratitude," she whispered. He acknowledged with a nod and turned toward departure, but hesitated at the threshold. Evening meal arrives at 6. I trust venison stew meets your approval. He paused. And Catherine, you're insufficient for this wilderness existence, too refined for agricultural labor, too breakable for frontier hardship. But I'll adapt circumstances. Somehow, we'll adapt this union. The declaration should have provided comfort. Instead, they magnified her terror beyond even his physical presence, because his delivery, the darkness entering his eyes when observing her, indicated that Samuel Blackwood was someone who achieved his objectives. And his objective, unmistakably, was her. Catherine's inaugural night passed nearly sleepless. The dwelling maintained excessive silence, each wooden complaint triggering visions of Samuel navigating the rooms. He'd displayed politeness during their meal, even tenderness. Yet she'd registered details, the manner his hands could fracture poultry bones effortlessly, the manner the massive oak table displaced when he applied pressure, the manner he observed her dining with something ravenous in his gaze unrelated to sustenance. The subsequent morning, she awakened discovering him already laboring, visible through her window as he mended fencing. He worked bare-chested, and Catherine found her gaze captive. His physique maintained proportion to his altitude, musculature shifting beneath sun-weathered skin like geological forces in motion. He manipulated fence posts requiring 3 typical men to relocate, drove them earthward with a sledgehammer appearing toy-like in his grasp. You've awakened. Catherine startled, spinning to discover him occupying her doorway, shirt restored but perspiration dampened. Your entrance escaped my notice, she managed, voice scarcely audible. I navigate quietly despite my proportions. Necessity taught that lesson early. He assessed her. Your appetite proved minimal yesterday evening. The kitchen holds breakfast. She pursued him, nearly running to match his extensive strides. The kitchen constituted his territory, everything scaled to his requirements. She required both hands for the coffee vessel he manipulated with 2 digits. When she struggled reaching elevated plates, he approached from behind, extending over her to retrieve them. Momentarily, she occupied the space between his form and the counter, enveloped by his warmth and scent leather and timber smoke and something distinctly masculine. His chest contacted her back, and she perceived his heart's rhythm, slow and consistent like percussion. You're trembling again, he observed quietly, his exhalation disturbing her hair. You're exceptionally large, she articulated. He laughed, a sound reverberating through her. That constitutes one description. He positioned the plates but maintained proximity. Does my potential to harm you generate fear? Yes, she confessed. Intelligent response. I could, without intention. His hand settled on the counter adjacent to her, his arm creating enclosure. But I won't. Never. You possess my oath. What motivated your bride advertisement? Catherine questioned, desperate to comprehend this man binding her fate. Why not pursue someone more compatible? His silence extended so prolonged she anticipated no response. Then he withdrew, providing breathing space. Have you attended a barn dance, Catherine? The question seemed disconnected. Yes, in Boston. Have you observed what transpires when a draft horse attempts dancing with ponies? She rotated to face him, comprehension dawning. I've existed alone since 15, he continued. That's when I achieved 6.5 feet and continued expanding. Women perceive me as aberrant or curious. Men perceive competition or menace. I attempted courtship several occasions, but he shrugged, the gesture creating massive shoulder movement. One young woman's father threatened lethal force if I approached her again. Declared me unnatural, that any offspring would be monstrous. That's merciless. That's truthful. Observe us, Catherine. You're diminutive as avian life, delicate as gossamer. I could destroy you unintentionally. He advanced again, and she had to tilt backward to sustain eye contact. But that doesn't constitute my desire. What constitutes your desire? Conversational partnership. Meal companionship. Someone who won't flee shrieking at my entrance. His hand elevated, hovering near her countenance without contact. Someone who might eventually perceive me as simply a man rather than a giant. Catherine studied him, This enormous being who just disclosed loneliness matching her own. And if I cannot? If you're perpetually too large and I'm perpetually too small? Then we'll construct connections, he stated simply. He extracted something from his pocket, a step stool exquisitely carved from dark timber, sufficiently small for portability but sturdy. I crafted this yesterday during your rest. Reasoned you'd require it for accessibility. Others now exist throughout the dwelling, and I'm constructing permanent steps into the kitchen counters. Catherine accepted the stool, fingers traveling over the smooth timber. He'd carved miniature flowers into the borders, delicate craftsmanship seeming impossible from such large hands. You created this. The detail is extraordinary. Large hands don't signify clumsiness. I've mastered carefulness, precision. He observed her examining his work. That's what this marriage requires, Catherine: precision, patience, and probably numerous step stools. Despite everything, she laughed. It was small, scarcely more than breath, but genuine. Samuel's countenance transformed upon hearing it, a smile breaking across his rough features that subtracted years from his appearance. There, he said softly. That surpasses cowering. Throughout the subsequent week, they established tentative rhythm. Samuel managed the ranch during daylight while Catherine organized the dwelling, learning to navigate spaces constructed for someone double her dimensions. He'd honored his word regarding modifications. Steps and stools materialized wherever necessity dictated, handles were installed at her elevation on doors and cabinets, a smaller chair appeared at the dining table. But evenings proved most challenging. Following supper, they'd position themselves by the hearth, attempting to bridge the enormous distance between them through conversation. Samuel cherished books but struggled with reading, his education constrained by years prioritizing labor over schooling. Catherine commenced reading aloud to him, and those hours evolved into something approaching peaceful until the night everything transformed. 2 weeks following her arrival, a storm advanced from the mountains. Not merely precipitation, but comprehensive thunderstorm with lightning converting night to day and thunder vibrating the solid dwelling. Catherine had never favored storms, and this exceeded any Boston experience. She occupied her modest bed, quilts drawn overhead, attempting to block the disturbance. But when a particularly violent thunder crack caused window rattling, she couldn't tolerate it further. Without deliberation, she fled her chamber toward the main dwelling area. Samuel occupied a seat by the diminishing fire, a book in his massive hands, spectacles positioned incongruously on his nose. He raised his gaze upon her entrance, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. Catherine, what's wrong? Another thunderclap vibrated the house, and she involuntarily vocalized distress, pressing herself against the wall. You fear storms, he stated, understanding immediate. He abandoned his book and stood, crossing to her in 2 strides. Come here. I'm acceptable, she falsified, even as another lightning flash caused her to flinch. No, you're not. He reached toward her, then hesitated. May I? She nodded, not trusting her voice, and he elevated her as easily as he might an infant. But he didn't maintain her like an infant. He cradled her against his chest, one arm beneath her knees, the other around her back, transporting her to his large chair by the fire. He seated himself with her in his lap, adjusting her so she curled against his chest, enveloped by his warmth and strength, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, a counterrhythm to the external chaos. During my youth, he said, his voice rumbling through his chest into her bones, I feared storms similarly. My mother would embrace me like this, narrate stories until the fear dissipated. You had a mother capable of embracing you? Catherine questioned, the absurdity momentarily distracting her from the storm. I wasn't perpetually giant-proportioned. I was actually diminutive for my age until 14. Then I expanded 1.5 feet in 1 year. His hand moved to her hair, stroking gently. My garments never fit, I maintained constant hunger, and I fractured everything I contacted until I mastered control. What became of your mother? Fever claimed her when I was 16. Father followed a year subsequently. Bequeathed me the ranch and minimal else. His hand continued its gentle movement through her hair. Been solitary since then. 12 years of excessive size for the world. Catherine relaxed against him incrementally, her storm fear fading as she concentrated on his voice, his warmth, the surprising gentleness of his touch. He was so large that she fit entirely within the circle of his arms, protected and surrounded, but somehow not confined. Improved? He inquired after a while. Yes, she admitted, then felt sufficient courage to add, you're exceptionally warm. Run hot. Always have. Probably why winter never troubles me substantially. He shifted slightly, retrieving a blanket from beside the chair and enveloping it around her. You're sufficiently tiny that cold must penetrate you entirely. I manage. You shouldn't merely manage. You're my wife. It's my responsibility to maintain your comfort. Safety. His arms tightened slightly around her. Happiness, if I can determine how. Catherine looked upward at him, this giant of a man attempting so earnestly to be gentle, to be her necessity. Why did you genuinely select me? From all the responses you must have received. I received 3 responses, he said. 2 were transparently only interested in the property and the wealth they presumed I possessed. But you wrote about loneliness, about incompatibility with your location, about desiring somewhere to belong. He touched her face gently with one finger, the gesture incredibly delicate. I thought perhaps someone else who didn't fit might comprehend. Might not flee. I nearly did that initial day. I know. I observed it in your eyes, like prey deciding whether to bolt. His thumb traced her cheekbone. What made you remain? The step stool, she admitted. You constructed me a step stool with flowers on it. No one's ever performed anything that considerate for me previously. They remained in comfortable silence as the storm raged externally. Catherine found herself studying his features in the firelight, the strong jaw, the crooked nose, the scar that should have generated fear but somehow didn't anymore. Samuel, what did you mean when you said you'd make it fit? Make me fit. His hand stilled in her hair. I meant I'd adjust everything. Transform whatever required transformation. Make the dwelling function for you, the ranch, the existence out here. And us. Will we fit? He was quiet for an extended moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than typical. Catherine, you're posing questions I lack answers to. You're so small I'm terrified of destroying you. But having you here, having you curl against me like this, it feels correct in a manner nothing else ever has. Catherine's heart was racing now, but not from fear. I feel it similarly, she whispered. His hand came beneath her chin, tilting her face upward to look at him. Don't articulate that unless you mean it. I've been solitary too extensively to survive false hope. I mean it. She reached upward, her small hand touching his scarred cheek. You're not what I expected. You're more gentler and lonelier and more careful than anyone your size should need to be. And when you hold me like this, I don't feel too small. I feel protected. Catherine. His voice was warning and plea combined. Kiss me, she whispered. I could harm you. You won't. He leaned downward slowly, providing her time to reconsider. Their size difference meant he had to curl around her, she had to stretch upward. And when their lips finally met, it was awkward and tentative and perfect. His kiss was incredibly gentle, just a press of lips. But Catherine felt it through her entire being. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with desire and worry in equal measure. Was that acceptable? He asked. Instead of answering, Catherine pulled his head back downward, and this time the kiss was deeper, more certain. She felt him tremble, this massive man actually shaking as he held her, and realized he was as overwhelmed as she was. When they separated, both were breathing laboriously. We should cease, Samuel said, though his arms didn't loosen their hold on her. Why? Because you've only been here 2 weeks. Because you're still afraid of me. Because if we don't cease now, I'm going to desire more than kisses. And I don't know how to desire you without risking harming you. Catherine could feel the truth of it in the way his whole body had gone tense, like he was fighting against himself. Then we wait, she said. But Samuel, we will fit. Perhaps not easily, perhaps not perfectly, but we'll discover a way. He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm on her face. You're braver than your appearance suggests, Catherine Blackwood. And you're gentler than your appearance suggests, Samuel Blackwood. They remained like that as the storm passed, neither willing to break the spell of this new understanding between them. But both knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations in this unusual marriage between a giant and a bird. As Catherine finally dozed off in his arms, Samuel held her like she was made of spun glass and steel combined, fragile and strong, tiny and fierce, impossible and absolutely his.